Hi, I'm Dana. I have made a video about meltdowns before and it does feel like a little bit of a cop-out to be making another one when it's going to be very similar. But a bunch of my videos are now 2 years old and I feel like I have learned how to make better videos for one, as well as figuring out a lot more about myself. So I think you are going to be getting a few more remakes lately. I'm sorry, I'm kind of starting to understand the Hollywood trend. So today I really want to talk about meltdowns because I've had this one in the pipeline for a little while. And the thing with trying to write notes about this and think about what I want to say in the video is that I feel like I barely remember my meltdowns after them. And this video is coming today because I very nearly had one this morning and I had to do quite a lot of work to not do that and to soothe myself and to re-regulate myself and stuff. So I both have the very fresh remembrance of how it feels, as well as some little coping strategies that I use and things that I try to implement to help myself, I guess. To start with though, a little bit about meltdowns. As always, this is my own experience. I'm not an educator, I'm not a professor of any sort, I'm not a doctor, I don't really know anything. This is just me and my thoughts and my experience and what I reckon. So for me, meltdowns there's a few different types, you know? When I was younger especially, I had a lot of the tantrumy meltdowns that we see people post their kids having on TikTok and the like, which they shouldn't, it's disgusting. But that was something that, obviously, as someone who wasn't diagnosed, it was just treated as a tantrum no matter what it was over. So I was made to feel a lot of shame and a lot of embarrassment, and as though it was something I should have been able to control and deal with when it really, really wasn't. But because of that, I think that then led to me creating my own type of little meltdown. I think honestly, a lot of us probably do, especially late diagnosed people, which is having very internalized meltdowns where it's all of the same emotions as it was when I was kicking and screaming and pulling my hair out kind of thing, but you would not be able to tell, you know? I had so many situations with past relationships and when I was still speaking to my family where I'd been fully pushed into meltdown state. There was whatever situation was happening, you know. I was very much in the place of I was not grasping what was around me. I wasn't able to engage with my surroundings. I'm fully inside of myself. And inside of myself is a steaming kettle, the oven top ones that scream and squeak when they're ready, you know? And I very much think it's the trauma response of not only learning that I will be punished and told off and made to feel bad about my meltdowns, but also that they, not only do they very much not help, they actively make things worse. And I feel like I've spent the majority of my life, and especially my childhood, just trying to figure out what I could do to not make things worse. I'm not going to be able to make them better, that never worked, but I can figure out how to not make them worse. So that was where I began to have very, very internalised meltdowns, especially when I was in school. I had so many when I was in school, where people could be talking to me and it would be several minutes later that I'd be what? You know? I completely disengaged from all of my surroundings, and I'm aware that that sounds like dissociation, but that's something that I've experienced at other times, and I know it's not the same because it's these situations where I know that I would have had a meltdown, but it's a situation where I don't feel able to, and I know that it will be more difficult for me in the long run if I do. So I'm going through all of the emotional steps of it. I'm having to work through the rage and the it's not even an anger. That's the thing, is I find it very difficult to tell what emotion's what. And I do think that a lot of my meltdowns are caused by anger and frustration and that overwhelm of I don't know what to do. I'm not explaining this very well. It's very difficult to explain, you know? It is very much this storm of emotions, and as someone who can't read and tell what half my emotions are anyway a lot of the time, it's just this massive negative tidal wave and I'm stuck in the middle of it just getting pulled along. And the least I can do to try and help myself out of it is make sure no one else can tell that's what's happening, you know? Keep it fully internalised, keep it to myself, learn how to just deal with it and get through it. And the third type of meltdown that I think I have is a sort of I call them panic attack meltdowns. I still sort of think of them as panic attacks because for many of my undiagnosed year, that was what everyone told me they were, you know? When I was I have these situations where I get so anxious and scared and overwhelmed and just everything's too much and I can't do it anymore and I can't breathe. I start to sweat, I start to cry, I can't control my body, I shake. And I'm aware that they're all also signs of panic attacks. But for me, I think it's very much a case of I'm able to internalise so many meltdowns and keep so many meltdowns back from being shown and being obvious and being a meltdown. I can't do that forever. You know, eventually it gets to a point where I can no longer withhold it all and like restrain it all and keep it all in, and I don't have the control over it. You know, I it's too much to control, and it starts coming out, and I keep it back as much as I can, so it doesn't go to the full meltdown like I had when I was younger, and like I realistically probably would still have if I was able to like feel and go through my emotions. You know, it's very much the result of bottling up my emotions, and I'm aware of that, but I don't really know how to not do it. And it's one of those things where, like, although I'm breaking them down and putting them into like different categories kind of thing, they're all the same thing. They all realistically should be the full meltdown. It's just that I've had to learn to mask and try to tamper down how I am naturally as a person. So I'm no longer able to like actually, like I say, show and feel and go through the emotions that I have. So they just get all bottled up until it becomes a meltdown, and then I try my best to just repress that until I can't anymore. And although I have framed like my big meltdowns as things that only happened in childhood, they're not. It's just that, like I said at the start, I sort of like blank out after having a meltdown. I forget about it very, very quickly. And it tends to only come from situations that I cannot get out of, where I have zero control over them and I cannot do anything, you know? And I often manage to make it through the situation, and the meltdown will come afterwards as soon as I'm out of it. So for a long, long time, whenever I went out and had a good time, and bear in mind for me personally, that's predominantly like gigs and loud, bright events, quite frankly. So I didn't realise, because I didn't know I was autistic, that I was having all these sensory issues and having all this sensory input that was just way too much for me. So even though I had emotionally a pleasant time and like really enjoyed myself and whatever else, I would get home and I would have this huge like sobbing scream, like punching the bed meltdown. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what the fuck it was. I didn't know why I did it. It was so weird to me. And as soon as I started reading up about autistic meltdowns, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. And I think it also ties in with like the trauma and masking aspect of like the smaller meltdowns, where it's because I'm not expecting it, because it's after the situation when I've emotionally had a good time. I haven't put up like the mental wall of like, we're not dealing with that, put that emotion away, because I haven't like emotionally perceived an issue. It's all like sensory wise, you know? And like it really pissed off my ex and my parents, because they'd be like, you've just had a really nice time, why are you now screaming and crying? And I'd be like, I don't know, I just feel awful. And it was horrible. And I think it was having those sort of like out of the blue unexpected meltdowns that also led to a lot of avoidant behaviour for me, and still does to some point, because it's one of those things where like I already lack a lot of social imagination. I've realised that's a lot of the reason that I get anxious before things. I really don't know how it's going to go or what it's going to be like I cannot imagine it. I can't grasp any concept of it. So I'm going into events already very anxious, knowing that even if I do enjoy the thing that I'm doing or the thing that I'm going to, chances are I'm gonna have a meltdown afterwards and feel awful and terrible. I feel like I've sort of tackled a lot of the things that I wrote notes on within those like sort of subcategories, to be honest, because a good amount of it was things like being mistaken for tantrums and being seen as a drama queen and being really made to feel awful for going through it, and as though like I just needed to grow up and I had full control over my emotions and was choosing to be this silly child, throwing myself on the floor and getting myself all upset, when like I could not control those emotions. Like it felt like it was all just happening to me and nobody cared. Like I was never offered comfort, I was never soothed through them. It was just, oh, Dana's throwing another tantrum. And it's like, what kid throws like a full, proper, legitimate tantrum because you've washed their blanket and it feels different? Like that's I don't want to say it's not normal, but I am saying that if I was a parent, I'd be like, what's going on there? I'm going to Google that, because that's not how an ordinary child may react. There's just so many things to do with it where I look at it and I'm like, I don't understand how my parents just laughed it off and were like, oh, Dana being a drama queen, when I was very clearly a child in distress. Like it, another video topic, but yeah. So moving on from that and talking about some of like my coping mechanisms, I go massively for stims. But moving on to some like coping mechanisms and little strategies to like, not necessarily get rid of it or downplay it, but like move the energy on in a way that's not a meltdown and doesn't make you feel awful, you know? So my number one big one is auditory stims. If I feel any sort of like meltdown, bad thing coming on, I'm straight into like either my speaker or my headphones and playing loud music. And I am someone who sometimes has a sensory issue with having headphones on, so that's why I have to go for the speaker sometimes. It varies. It's one of the few areas where I've started to actually figure out how to just do what feels good for me, you know? And of course I have my comfort bands. I predominantly go for Foo Fighters or Alanis Morissette. It's usually Foo Fighters, I won't lie. Every now and again it might be someone else, but 9 times out of 10 it's Foo Fighters. Like there's a Foo Fighters song I can't listen to anymore because I listened to it immediately after my dad died. Like that was how I got through not having a meltdown in the middle of town because my dad had just died. So yeah, that's a massive one for me. And it's also one of the only times that I actually do like what I would consider to be like visibly autistic stims, which is I do a lot of like hand stuff. Like that's, I like to tense and untense my fingers like this, where like you get like the clicky sort of sensation in your joints while also shaking, and that's a whole like, this is the best stim. So like I think having like the shape, moving your arms in that way like forces the muscles in your arms to relax a little bit, and doing that to your hands is like tensing up and creating a lot of like, it feels heavy, it feels hard and heavy to me in my hands, and having that like mixture of bodily sensations really like feels like it draws a lot of energy away from like the emotions that I'm feeling and me being so in my head and the like. I also today went on a walk, but that was because it was the right time of day and the right kind of weather. I would not go for a walk if it's too cold or if it's too hot. I wouldn't go when I think that people are going to be finishing work or going to work or finishing school. If I think that there will be people about, there is no chance. No, But today it was like 1:30, 2 p.m. I think. So I was like, there's not going to be people around, like not many anyway. And it's also a sort of like grey drizzly day where like you can feel like the drizzle and the cold on your face, but like you're bundled up in a coat, so you're not actually cold. And it's just like, again, it's a real sensory experience. And I'm aware that that's not something you can just do anytime. Like I say, like it very much does have to be like the right conditions with like the right type of wind and everything. Like it needs to be just right to actually help, and not just be like, yeah, I went for a fucking walk, now what? Which is my reaction a lot of the time when people are like, oh my god, mental health walk, or like exercise for your mental health. I've done all that shit. It does not help my mental health. It does not make me feel better. But if all the conditions are just right for it to be sensorily awakening for me, it's a good walk. Jumping back, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. Back to stims a sec. I also do a lot of just pulling my knees into my chest and doing a good old rock. I know that it's like, you always see like mental hospital movies and shit, people rocking that way. I don't like that. I feel like my coccyx bone like sticks out too much for it. I had a whole conversation with my friend about that the other day because I can't do like sit-ups and shit properly because laying on my back on the floor, there's like a bump on my lower back that I'm fairly sure is my coccyx bone, and it like digs into the floor and it really hurts, and I don't understand how people do that stuff. And it's the same for me if I go back and forth, so I'm a little side to side rocker. I like it like that. And I can't show you properly because I have to be in like just the right positions for everything, because I've got like my windowsill and the cat tower and stuff to put my legs up on, but I'll like lean back and sit in a comfy space and put my arms like around myself, and I have to get just the right level of my ribs, and I'll just pat back and forth like that. That's one of those things that I just sort of started doing because I'm a big like self-hugger sometimes when I'm having a bad time, and it just sort of felt right. But then I have seen stuff on TikTok about like doing like rhythmic body massage patting and stuff to help with anxiety, and although like I've said it's not anxiety, it is autistic meltdowns, I think that the nervous system and stuff probably reacts in a somewhat similar way. As always, I'm not educated, that's a guess, but I would guess that it works in like a similar sort of way for meltdowns and anxiety. And like, given that I just sort of like came up with that on my own years ago and I've done it ever since, I probably should look more into other things and see if they would also be really helpful to me. I do also, final bit of like tip, it's not advice, please don't take this advice, this is just some tips that I've come up with that work for me, that might work for you too, use your own judgment. But I also sometimes just let it happen. Otis is making so much noise in the back of this video. You are. But yeah, sometimes when it's coming on and I'm like, I'm in a safe space, I'm like in my room or whatever, you know, I'm alone, it's the right setup for me to be able to just lay on my bed and cry really loud, and no one's going to say shit or do shit, I'm not going to be judged, no one's ever going to know except for me, which is already a little bit humiliating, I won't lie, just knowing that I'm doing it myself. I do have some degree of the thing of like, sometimes when I just let the meltdown happen, I'm just like, I'm going with it, I'm feeling this way, I don't know what else to fucking do, my little coping mechanisms aren't working, I'm just gonna have a meltdown now. Like, I will be like mid meltdown and be like, god, imagine if someone saw this, like, it looks so fucking fake, they'd think that I was like faking having an autism meltdown. Like, maybe I am faking having an autism meltdown. It's like, I am mid meltdown, I did not want to feel this way, and it's just that I literally like overthink my own emotions so much that I get to that point, you know? And like, nobody is ever going to see that shit. Like, I've never filmed one. I've never had one in front of anybody on purpose. Like, you know, like, I know full well that I'm not doing it for attention or to show people I'm autistic, and yet there's like a massive part of me every time that's like, proving it to them all now, aren't you, honey? Like, no, I'm fucking not. Like, I'm just feeling like shit. Like, but it is one of those things where, like, you can't just bottle it up forever and ever and ever. Believe me, I've tried. It always comes out eventually, and it usually comes out in the way that you don't fucking want it to if you do that. So letting yourself just do it sometimes can prevent much worse situations, you know? One thing that I haven't gone into in this video that I do think often plays into autistic meltdowns, and definitely did for me in my teen years, is self-harm. But I'm already having a tough day, and I think it'll make me feel a lot worse, and I think I'd find it really triggering right now, so I'm not going into it. But I do want to just like very quickly acknowledge that that is obviously a thing for a lot of people. It's something I have myself experienced. I'm not trying to like ignore and eradicate it. And also, like, I feel like it is often sort of stereotyped that that's just what autistic people do. We just happen to like punch ourselves in the face every now and again when we're upset, and it's like, yeah, like it's happened, you know. But also that is self-harm. Like, it's not some like funny little quirky autistic thing. Like, that is self-harm. And although it's valid that that happens sometimes and we can't always control it, obviously please do try to stay safe and look after yourself and not hurt yourself in those ways, please, if you can help it. Like, I don't know why I'm doing a fucking PSA at the end here, but I felt like I needed to, like, you know, if people are watching this that have meltdowns, I feel like I do need to say a little, like, try to keep yourself safe during them. If you take my tips and like go for a walk, do it safely. Don't like go for a walk at like 2 a.m. and get murdered, please. You know, be sensible, be safe. Try to, I know that like your brain just sort of falls out your ass half the time during meltdown sort of times. I get that it's not always easy to like maintain the self-awareness to keep yourself safe, but please do try to, or try to at least have like something in place so that someone else will keep you safe when that time comes around. You know, like, be sensible, be smart, and look after yourself, please. And also, God, no, that feels so wrong. That was so serious. I can't be like, and also, like, please subscribe to me. Like, I'm going to do it now, but I feel like I needed to point out that I recognised that that was going to be incredibly insensitive, and I didn't technically do it, kind of. But yeah, I post videos on Thursdays and Sundays. I post on TikTok daily. Someone asked if I'd consider posting them all here. And when I do ones that I think are like interesting and relevant and are like actual content, I do post them as shorts. But the vast majority of my TikToks are just me mouthing along to like some little sound with a little like caption over it being like, when the other people aren't autistic. You know, like, it's fun little bits of content for TikTok, but it's not really stuff that I'd want associated with my YouTube. Like, I'm kind of enjoying TikTok still because I have stopped taking it seriously, you know. Like, I don't see it as like a serious like content creation place. It's for me to like make stupid videos and try to be funny. So I won't be posting them all here. You'll have to go follow me on TikTok if you want to see them all. But I do post the ones that I think are interesting and informative and are actually like, you know, have a place over here. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and you can also find me over on Patreon, although you could also become a YouTube member if you don't even want to have to leave this platform. And you can also donate to me on Ko-fi if you'd like to, but there's never any pressure, you don't have to, it's all fine. I'm going to go and see what the fuck Otis is meowing about now. So whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you're having a lovely morning, evening, day, afternoon, week, month, year, and I will see you again in a couple of days.